is part of every business owner's journey. And that is the art and science of overcoming the obstacles that you face.
Yes.
They are inevitable.
Yes.
They are existential sometimes.
Yes.
They are fear-inducing most of the time. What do you do when you hit one of the obstacles?
Well, I think it's really important. First of all, it's great to be with you all here. I know you've had a full day, and I hope to add some real value to you in this brief time. I think it's really critical that you understand that everybody wants to grow their business, and we all go through different phases, right? Just like human beings go through phases. You know, you give birth to your business, and you're an infant, and an infant is a run for survival, and cash flow problems are a natural process in most cases, and you're running. Hopefully you get to a teenager where now cash flow is not a problem, you're growing like crazy, and then you have a new problem. You don't have systems in place. And maybe you get to young adult where you have to decide what you're not going to do. Eventually, hopefully get to prime where you're growing your business revenues and you're growing your profits and you got a professional organization and you're not doing it. Because as long as you're doing it, really you don't have a business. What you have is you're self-employed. There's nothing wrong with being self-employed. But whenever you meet someone who's in business is stressed, they're always a business operator. And my focus is to become a business owner. How do you do that? You realize that the chokehold in the growth of your business is always the leader. And it's your skills and it's your psychology. And I found it's 80% psychology and 20% skills. You got to have the marketing skills. You got to be able to lead. You got to be able to recruit. You got to do all those things. But really, most importantly, you got to get it through what I call the threshold of control. And this, to me, is the secret to really succeeding in business. And it's pretty simplistic. How many of you snowboard or ski? Anybody out there snowboard or ski? Give you a sense? So most people are terminally intermediate when they get into that sport, right? You know, they really never get that good. They're not really a belonger. They're kind of in the middle, and they never get much better. And I think the reason is they never push themselves beyond what they can handle, right? You're used to greens or blues, and you find yourself on a double black, and what happens? Everything inside you freaks out because you're past what I call the threshold of control, your comfort zone. And you look down, you go, I could die doing this. So now you have two choices. Either most people slam themselves on the ground, hang on for dear life, and try not to skid off the cliff, and at best what you do is survive, or a few people let go of their fear, no matter how scary it is, and goes, I got to go down this thing, and there's no other choice, and they focus on where they want to go instead of what they're afraid of. And they find a way to carve. And once you carve a few of them, that double black is your bitch, right? You don't have to worry about that anymore, right? And so that's what happens in business. So for me, I can remember going and starting my first business in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I got on a radio show. And this person, it was a shock jock radio show, and I didn't know it. And they started attacking me and saying I'm a liar and a charlatan. You can't do these things. And this therapist called me up and said, you know what? I've dealt with people forever. You can't wipe out a phobia in less than an hour. It can take 7 years. I have a patient right now I've worked with for 7 years, and I've been able to solve this. And I said, great. Bring that patient tonight. I'm doing a free guest event at the Holiday Inn, and I'll take care of that. It should take me 10 or 15 minutes. Right? and
you
so
do it?
I did it, and I was able to do it. I wrapped a snake around this woman. She had a snake phobia. Phobia is an uncontrollable response. So because of that, I had people coming to these guest events like crazy, and I thought I hit the home run, right? And I did this big guest event. There was like 1,000 people there, which for me would be like, I don't know, 100,000 people in an event right now. And after I was done, a bunch of people signed up for my seminar because I did a free value-add event, and then I would invite them to come spend 3 days with me. And this man walks up to me, and he's from immigration. He goes, a great seminar. He goes, I'd like to see your work permit. And I said, what's a work permit? Right? You know, when you're in the beginning of business, you don't know these things, right? He goes, well, to work in this country, you need a work permit. And he said, I'll tell you what, I got to see you tomorrow at 5:30. I goes, well, my seminar starts at 7. He goes, you'll be fine, just you got to be there at 5:30. He said, I'm not asking, it's a requirement. So I show up at 5:30, I wait for half an hour, now I'm starting to stress. And finally I sit down with a guy and he says, you're taking away Canadian jobs. I said, how many Canadian firewalkers are there? Come on, that's what I was doing those days. And he said, no, you teach NLP skills, neuro-linguistic programming, and these people have classes of 20 people and you got a class of 500. And so they say you're taking jobs, so your event is over. So what do you mean your event's over? He goes, if you walk on that stage tonight, we will handcuff you and deport you. This is what I call a threshold of control. Right? He says, you're going to have to give the money back. I said, I can't give the money back. I spent all the money to put on the seminar. I wasn't a good businessman. I just wanted to help everybody, right? So I spent all the money to do it. And he goes, you have no money? Well, you're going to have to deal with that. So I walked out of the building. I have 40 minutes. People are going to arrive. I can't go on stage. What do you do? I told my 3 staff members, 2 of which were volunteers, what happened. They're like, And I said, here's what we're doing. I'm doing this seminar. And they said, you're going to go to jail. I said, I'm not going to jail. I said, how close is the border? True story. And they said, well, there's a place called Bellingham, Washington. It's about an hour and 40 minutes. I said, rent me 6 buses, and I'll meet the people out front before they go in the hotel. This is not a problem. I met everybody up front. They said, this is a traveling seminar. It's a surprise, right?
We're going to Bellingham.
We're going to America. And it was a 3-day seminar. We had to go and come back each day and night for 3 days in a row. I got all but 4 people to agree to do it. And then I got to Bellingham, Washington at the Holiday Inn there, and there was like a bar mitzvah or a wedding or some stuff next door, and it was so loud you couldn't hear anybody. And so I said, just lie on the floor, close your eyes, I'm going to hypnotize you into this shit, right? You know? But so what happened was you learn how to get through that, right? And we learn how to be resourceful. When you realize that your problem is not a lack of resources, it's not a lack of money or technology or contacts, it's not. It's your psychology. Because the ultimate resource is resourcefulness. And human emotion, that's what starts wars, that's what makes a business begin, that's how you have children, that's how we end wars, it's all emotion. And so what I really learned to do is how to manage my emotions. So, you know, once you solve that one, the next one shows up. I had somebody, I started a franchise, and a couple franchisees were really upset when one of the people representing on my side said they didn't make things clear to them, and you know, it's all bullshit, but it cost me $5 million in 4 years. I thought the first one was like a $50,000 challenge. Now I got a $5 million challenge. And I took all the money I'd saved in my entire career to pay that off, and I was starting over again. And then I grew from that. And then I finally got, you know, I had a partner in business, and long story short, they had a business that was losing $1 million a day, and he turned it around and making $1.8 billion in EBITDA. He offered me his partner, and I signed a document saying we're all joint and several. There was $40 million in debt. I figured I had $10 million of the debt to have $1.8 billion in infrastructure. And it turned out my partners, 2 of them were broke. They weren't billionaires. They had lost their money. And the other one was the son of a billionaire, and his dad had given him nothing, had $5 million to his name. So I was on the hook shortly after for $120 million when they didn't have $120 million. I figured out how to deal with that. By doing that, I eventually took my companies to this year will surpass $6 billion in 33 companies, because I made it through the threshold of control. So I want you to know, when you see these big numbers by any entrepreneur, they all started with blocking and tackling, and they all started with how do I get both the skill and, more importantly, the psychology. You can get the skill if you can get that part of you that just doesn't die, the part of you that finds the way to add more value than anybody else so you can keep growing.
Where does the perseverance come from for you? Where does the indomitable spirit come from? Here, the title of your book, Unshakable. Yeah. Where does the drive come from? You did not grow up in easy circumstances.
No.
At all. No college.
No.
At all.
No. All self-educated.
Self-educated, a household that was not easy.
True.
Is that part of the reason that you are as perseverant as you are, as optimistic as you are, as forceful as you are?
That didn't create my optimism.
No, it didn't create your optimism. but maybe it was a way to
I think it developed moxie. My mother was a really good woman. I didn't talk about it when she was alive, and frankly, even if she passed, I didn't talk about it until one day I was sitting in front of a group of 30 kids that were abused by their parents, and I told them that, you know, your biography is not your destiny, and you're not defined by what happened. But I could see in their eyes, a big, tall, white, rich guy, you know, he doesn't understand. And so I told them the whole story. My mom beating me against the wall till my head bled, pouring liquid soap down my throat till I threw up. So I think in order to protect my younger brother and sister, I had to become a practical psychologist. That drove me, and I developed moxie to be able to deal with stuff. So that was the gift. If my mom had been the mother I wanted to be, I wouldn't be the man I'm proud to be, I think. So that was the gift in it. But I think the drive part is falling in love with your customers. I love people. I've always loved people. And I hate suffering because I've suffered. And I love to light people up, and not just light them up, pump them up. I love to have them have a skill, have them a tool, have a system. You know, when I do my boot camps each year for our business mastery programs, I guarantee everybody there on the day one, you'll have $1 million of value in your opinion, or we'll give you, keep all the stuff you got and we'll give you your money back. No one ever leaves, because I know how to add that value in the business for those people. So I think the drive is, the biggest mistake I think businesses make is many businesses are started by people that you built the product you love, and that may still be true for you. Like, you built this great jewelry, or you built this great software, or whatever skill set you have. But the problem is the world changes so fast now. I mean, I'm old enough. Who remembers the Sony Walkman? Anybody ancient enough to remember that shit? That product lasted 20 years. Now a product like that won't even last a year, right? The competition is too high. So today, if you and I are going to really succeed, you got to fall in love with your ideal customer. Because look, I'm sure you know that right now the economy we have is looking pretty good, but it's going to correct because we've done nothing since 2008 except print more money. And we didn't even print money. We put ones and zeros in computers. So there's going to be some corrections, and when those happens, it's going to shake people up. You need to fall in love with a client who's going to do well with you even when the economy goes to hell. Think about it. Starbucks, I was sitting across from Howard Schultz and had a great conversation and said, what is he most proud of? And he said, he used to say starting Starbucks. Then he said, now it's surviving 2008. If they closed, I think it was 1,300 stores, if I remember correctly, for $2 coffee. So you need to get your ass ready for winter because it's coming. And if you have got challenges now, but if you do well in winter, you'll dominate for the rest of the time. And the way you do well in winter is you fall in love with your ideal clients, and then you come up with the irresistible offer for them. Steve Jobs created 99-cent songs, but he didn't create that shit. We all know that. Where'd it come from? Who's old enough to remember Columbia House, where you got like 10 albums for $1? Remember that? Or for a quarter and stuff. They built $1 billion company. Tom's Shoes, shitty product. I love him. Great what he does, but 2 for 1, being able to do something where I get it and I benefit somebody else, brilliant idea. Built the whole company on that. He didn't build it on the product. He built it on the mission, right? So you need an irresistible offer for the client who's ideal for you, and you want to fall in love with a client. Don't fall in love with your product or service because those need to change. And if you fall in love with your product or service, somebody's going to beat you. They're going to be anticipating. I always tell businesses, there's 2 businesses you have to manage right now. You have to run the business you're in, because if you don't run that, your cash flow, your challenges are going to bite you. But you also have to run the business you're becoming. And both businesses you have to be making progress on. If you get all excited about the future and all the cool stuff that's coming, and you go work on that, and there's no cash flow now, you're dead in the water. If you just work on today, you're going to wake up and go, what the hell happened? My competition beat me. It's those 2 sides. And my 33 companies, I look at what the company is now and what it has to be constantly. So we're doing the grunt work, if you will, the important day-to-day work, while we're anticipating the future.
When you were building your businesses, and you've gone through an evolution, as all business owners do. I mean, what you were doing 30 years ago isn't really what you're doing today. How and when did you know that you were doing in life what you were meant to do? Because I think that's part of the quest of the entrepreneur, is to achieve that. When did you know it? How did you know it?
When did I know? I think I've known you. I think you know it at different stages, at different levels, at different times. It's like I can remember one that stands out from you. And yes, that pops in my head is President Clinton calling me. I was with Peter Guber, my partner in the esports business, and we both owned the LAFC new MLS franchise, soccer franchise, building a stadium here. I was at his home in Aspen, and he says, the president's on the line for you. And it was President Clinton. And I picked the phone, and I talked to the president for a few minutes, and he told me what's going on. And I said, Mr. President, I'm completely honored you want me to come visit with you, and I'd love to, but I want you to know I'm not a fan. I said, it was the time in which you said the economy's stupid, and then you turned around and did all these things that weren't related to the economy, and he looked like a very weak president at that point. And I remember Peter looking at me going, you just told the President of the United States you're not a fan. He's calling you, telling you, and inviting you to come out to Camp David. But it was great. I said, I want to be sincere. I'd love to serve you, but I'm not a sycophant, right? Yeah. And so I went there and spent time with him. And I think the moment I know that I was doing what I love was, there were a couple other people there, and they were all trying to get his attention. And he and I went for this walk, and this deer went by, and he was telling me, about all these past presidents. And he was honestly at the time complaining about how unfair things were. And I thought, this is the President of the United States, and he's effed up. And I'm 31 years old, and I got to help this bastard, and then that night he wanted me to stay, and it was New Year's, and I left Aspen with my family and Peter, and I promised my family I'd come back, and I said, no, I promised my family, Mr. President, I said I'd be happy to work with you in the future, and I left. Leaving the president when everybody else stayed was a moment I realized I'm doing what I'm really supposed to do. I've kept my priorities straight. My family's still number one. Making contribution is number two. I'm able to play on the scale that's global, and I'm able to play on the scale that matters most, which is local and family. I think that would be a moment that sticks out for me.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but since you brought up the subject of presidents, I have to ask you about the current president.
Yes.
Walked
right into that one.
Have you advised him? And if you haven't, how would you help him?
brain transplant? No, just kidding. Look, I know the president quite well. I've known him for many years. I gave him his first big speech. I might be to blame. He wrote about it in his book. He thought he was coming to speak to 200 people in my seminar with 10,000 people, and he just kind of lost it a little bit. And then his number one piece of feedback on how to succeed was get a prenup. And I thought, oh my God. And I know Mrs. Clinton. I know Mrs. Clinton very well as well. So I had a great difficulty in this last election because I felt like both parties lied. And I think that's extremely hard. I mean, everybody tells white lies, but some were pretty exaggerated and obvious on both sides. And so I found it was a more difficult time. I help people on both sides of the aisle. I don't talk about who I help unless they talk about it publicly. President Clinton shared, he called me one day and said, I got this overhead speaker, the president's calling him. It was in my offices, and big offices and 2 floors. And I went to pick up this phone, and sure enough, it's the secretary, and the president's waiting, and he says, Tony, they're going to impeach me in the morning. What should I do? I was like, could you call me sooner? It's tomorrow morning, right? What the hell are you going to do, right? So, he said, what should I do? And I said, the answer is not what should I do, you're asking the wrong question. First question I'm going to ask is, what do you want? Do you want parents, moms, dads to have their kids look up to you, or do you want to just stay in office? I mean, it's a different outcome. I said, if you want to stay in office, I said, easy for me, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not in your position, but let's be honest, you're never going to get thrown out of office. There's too many votes on your side. So I said, you're going to stay in office if you do nothing. But I said, if you really want to be respected, I said, you can share the truth. You're a lawyer without putting yourself at risk and still get more of the truth out. And we had this great conversation. He said, man, that's exactly right. That's exactly what I do. So I'll call you back. I'll call you back in 20 minutes. So I'm waiting 20, 30, 45. About an hour later, the secretary calls me and says, President wants you to know he's still resolving things. He wants to get back to you. And then another 30 minutes went by, and I'm thinking, I'm affecting history here, right? And then I saw him standing with all the Democrats beside him just saying, nope, we're going to kind of keep the same component and went through things. So over the years, I've had a chance to work with people on all sides. And what I think about the current president is he's a terrible communicator, but I think he actually has some good ideas. And I also think he's communicated so poorly, and our world is so divided that now anything he says is seen through that filter. If I think you are the nicest man in the world, it totally controls my experience of you. It has nothing to do with you. It's my belief. If you treat me mean one day and we're best friends, I'll probably go, you're having a bad day, right? If I can't resolve it with you. And who's ever had a bad day where you hope somebody else thought that about you, you were just having a bad day, right? So, but if I think you're a manipulating bastard, and I'm wrong, but I believe it, and you don't treat me mean, you treat me real nice, what's the first question in our mind? What does he want? So your questions, your belief, your emotion, your experience has nothing to do with life. It's shaped by what you believe. And most of you believe what you believe not by interacting with these people personally. You're doing it through the media. And the media is a great component, but everything is sound bites. And let's be honest, it's no longer about informing you. It's about startling you. Informing you will never get your attention. There's too much. We got oceans, people say that we're living in an information society. That's total bullshit. The information society died a long time ago, right? We're drowning in information. We're starving for wisdom. And what we get now are sound bites. And now people don't, it's not news anymore. On both sides of the table, people basically pretend it's news when it's all commentary. And so your perception, it's like I had lunch recently with George W. Bush. I brought him out to speak to a group of my funding groups. And I bring up people on both sides of the aisle. And this year we're working with President Obama to see if we can get him in. But to give you an idea, most people there thought, they're more liberal, and they were thinking this guy's evil. And after 2 hours of conversation, there wasn't a person in the room that still thought that.
Right.
They liked him, but I asked him about his decisions, and they got to see why he made the decisions he did. And when you see the why, instead of all the bullshit you hear and the generalizations that he's an evil guy, you start to go, wow, I might have made a different decision. I might not have with that information that he had at that time. And I asked him about the current president, and it was still during the election when this was occurring. And I said, obviously, I know you wanted your brother to win. And I admired President Bush for never attacking the past president. He never attacked President Obama. He was a class act, even when he disagreed. So he told me privately what he felt. And then he said, Tony, I remember when Nixon was elected, and he said, I thought that was the end of the American presidency. I mean, the president of the United States is gone. I mean, he's evil. He did the wrong thing. And he said he didn't destroy it. He didn't. And he said, so here's what I figured out. The office is bigger than the occupant. And I really believe that's true. I think if you want to go home tonight with a little bit of comfort inside, go back to that truth. The office is bigger than the occupant. And you see it when he does things, and then there's a judicial branch that balances it. And I think we're in a situation where the biggest challenge we have as a society is we've demonized the other side on almost every issue.
Right.
It used to be that, congressmen and senators would go fight like crazy on the floor and then they go have a beer together. Now you're radioactive if you talk to somebody. And that's huge. I met Mr. Gorbachev. I got a chance to fly him for 4.5 hours, and I asked him what ended the Cold War, and he said the end of demonization. He said it used to be you guys were attacking us and everything you did was evil. We were the evil empire and we knew you were evil. And he said one day, he said, I was sitting there with President Reagan and he was lecturing me. And he said, I could feel the anger. He said, I could feel my face burning red. I was so mad. And I said to him, you are not my teacher and I am not your student. And you will not lecture me. And he said, then I lectured him on the evils of capitalism. And then we're going back and forth. And he said, so that's when in the Cold War. And I said, that's a really great answer, but I'm with you for 4 hours. And I want to know the moment. What's the moment? I'm a student of history. What changed the world? Because most of us forget. That's probably, take away terrorism. Terrorism is nothing compared to the level of nuclear assault that the USSR and the US had at that stage. Biggest change we've had. And he thought for a moment, and he shared this great moment with me. He said, he hit his leg, he's talking through an interpreter, but he recognizes, understands a lot of English. He's smacking his leg and giggling like a little kid. He goes, I will tell you the moment. He said, we were having this fight. Back and forth, back and forth. I was lecturing him, he was lecturing me, and all of a sudden he just stood up like this and he said, this is not working. And he turned and walked 3 steps away, and then he turned back and said, can we start fresh? My name is Ron, are you Mikhail? And it had that same impact that it did on you just now. He said, he was laughing uncontrollably. He goes, I knew I could do business with this man. You had to love the man. And then he said, Reagan also knew that Gorbachev loves children. And there were no children going to go to the USSR, right? Soviet Union. And Reagan brought a group of children over and let them be in the care of Gorbachev. And he said it completely changed the game for him. So it was a moment, just a moment of breaking somebody's pattern. And that works in an intimate relationship, it works in a business challenge, but it also works on the scale of society and history.
I want to go to audience questions, and I hope you all have sent some to the Iconic Tour hashtag. I'll go to those in just a sec. But from politics back to entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurship, you've built businesses, you've faced business challenges, you have talked to people like the people in this room, entrepreneurs. What do they ask you most, and what do you tell them?
Time. Time seems to be the largest issue. How many of you have time issues in running your business, having to have a life and your time? Can I see your hands out there who feels like that's there? So you can see it's about 90%
there you go.
of this room,
Yeah.
right? And some people are just too tired to raise their hand. But the issue of time is not the real issue. The real issue is that they're operating as an operator, not an owner.
Yeah.
And so what I start to do in the beginning, you have to do both, right? But what I start to do is show them how you have to be able to break off and get other people to do things. But more importantly, I teach people, I do a 5-day boot camp, I call Business Mastery, a couple times a year. And we bring in businesses from all over the world, literally. And we have people just starting a business, and we have people with, businesses that are doing $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion. And what you find is that there's a common pattern amongst all these group of people where they find themselves, if it's a small business, they do everything because they figure like they're the only one can do it, or they tried someone else and they failed. Well, that happens in every business. You have to begin to leverage yourself, or you're just going to be self-employed. And you'll never have the scalability. A business is a system that adds value even when you're not there. And you as a leader have to get good enough to both hire people and train people so that you're not a manager. A manager works with people to make sure they get the job done while you're there. But if you have to be there, could I run 33 companies? I mean, every 4 days I'm on a plane, train, helicopter on stage somewhere on average in a year. And I got 33 companies. There's 12 I manage directly, but I couldn't do that by management. I do it by leadership. I build leaders who can make their own decisions. I hire people that are the best of the best. Now in the beginning, that's hard because you have no money, right? So you hire the best, it's called you, and you pay them nothing, right? And then now you try to hire other people, and what do? You hire your friends, which is a disaster because they're not as skilled, and you love them, and it's hard to manage them. And then I hired people that were really talented, but they were mean, they didn't share my values. And so eventually you get to that place where you can find the right people. But I think the most important secret for the growth of any business, the question I guess on how to get over the time, and the answer is you got to take 2 hours, 90 minutes a week with your team of 1, 2, 3, 2,000, and you got to meet where you work on the business. And I teach people a format called 7-7, where there's 7 areas of a business that you cannot miss: marketing, sales, optimization, the financials, culture. And I'll make sure that each week you and your team focus on that, not the day-to-day business, but how do we strengthen our marketing not just for this run, but overall how we build the brand. What do we do to change our sales process? How do we optimize the business? How do we spend no money and grow the business 30% in the next 3 to 6 months? And when you take small markers in the business that are critical and you improve them 5, 10, 15%, but you do 12 of them, you'll grow your business 120, 130%, 140% because there's a compounding impact. You don't just get the improvement you've made. So I try to help businesses to make those changes so you have time to think and be strategic. Because if you're just running, how many of you are stressed? I'll be honest if you would. Today, being here and not being at your business, how many feel some stress in your business being away even for a day? Okay, write down, I'm a business operator, F that, right? I'm gonna become a business owner, you've gotta be.
Yeah. Let's go to a question from the audience. What would the 30-year-old version of yourself say to you today with conviction and be flat wrong about?
Let's see.
What would the 30-year-old Tony Robbins say to you today?
Well, first of all, he's dead, so he's not going to say shit today. I buried him a long time ago. It was on 57. I would say the 30-year-old would say, this is what we're going to do this year, and it would be these huge numbers. And I developed a principle around the time I was 30, which is most of us overestimate what we're going to do in a year, and we underestimate what we're going to do in a decade. And a decade happens that fast. You'll blink your eyes and a decade will be here.
That is
a
great point.
I really, truly, everything I do is long term. I think it's the biggest challenge we have in corporate America is everybody's looking at the next quarter. Instead of the best business people, the Mark Benioffs, the Steve Wynn's, the Peter Gubers, the people that I hang with, they all are decade-long people. When I was 14, I said, this is how my life's going to. I decided. I said, in my 20s, I'm going to help. I want to have the skill to help anyone change their life. If I'm committed and they're committed, it's going to be done. I'll have the ability. So I got to build to that, which I did. And then I said, in my 30s, at 14, I said, I'll do that with groups of people instead of one-on-one. And then in my 40s, I'll do it with big groups. In my 50s, I'll do it with companies. In my 60s, I'll either do it in government as a servant there or in a religious context, because I'm a spiritual person, but I don't tell people what to believe religiously. But at that point, I've lived long enough, maybe I will.
Would you ever run for office?
Before I would have said yes. Now the answer is no. I've served on both sides of the aisle, and it's not really about the office. It's about fundraising right now so much of the time. And I would not do that unless I ran with my own money and maybe a small number of friends. But at this stage, I think it would disrupt my wife's life so much. Yeah. I'm a very public person and she's not, and I feel bad for her, so I don't think that would be the right direction.
Let's go to Jeff Conlon's question. If mindset is the key or a key, how do you shift your mindset? I was going to ask a question that's related to that, and that is, you're now, well, you say you're top of the world, but you're a confident guy. What do you do? What do you do when you have self-doubt? And that's sort of, how do you shift your mindset? How do you deal with self-doubt?
I don't have a lot of it at this stage, but I...
Shocking!
I'm being honest, right? I think self-doubt is, instead of self-doubt, I would say questioning. I think it's critical to question, but at certain stages. If you're questioning all the time, you have nothing but fear and doubt, right? You only believe something because you don't question it, right? Someone tells me, oh, so-and-so, talk behind your back this, and you go, no, they're my friend, they'd never do that. Your belief, you're certain they're not going to do it, so you don't even entertain it. But if 2 or 3 people tell you that and they go, wow, could John really be doing this behind my back? And you start questioning it. Have you ever done that? You've been upset with somebody, you confront them, and then you find out it's all bullshit, they didn't do anything wrong, and you feel like an idiot? So for me, I think there's a time to question. And so I organize that. When I'm beginning something, I do that. And my investments is a perfect example. If you look at somebody, like Richard Branson, for example. Richard is this giant risk taker, right? But he's got one question. He questions within himself and everyone else. How are we going to protect the downside? It's his number one question. You never believe it. The guy risks his life. When it comes to investments in business, he doesn't risk anything. He told me when he was building Virgin, he's taking on British Airways, and it's a giant outlay in capital. I mean, this could literally bankrupt him, and everybody said it would. So he said, okay, how to protect the downside? And he negotiated with Boeing for a year and a half and convinced them that if he went out of business, if he was wrong and lost his business in the first 2 years, he could give back all the jets and have no liability whatsoever. So his whole focus is asymmetrical risk reward. How do I take the least risk with the most upside? If I was going to say anything to entrepreneurs in this room, the illusion that you've been taught is that great entrepreneurs take giant risks. It's total bullshit. There are some exceptions that have, and they've gotten lucky. But if you look at the ones that consistently succeed, they know the upside will take care of itself. They focus on how to protect the downside, and they take risk where they know I'm taking a limited risk for an unlimited upside. So if I'm wrong, I'm still okay. You know, I work with Paul Tudor Jones, one of the top 10 traders in the history of the world. And Paul, I've worked with him, I've coached him now for 24 years. He hasn't lost money in those 24 years on his own personal trading. And during that time, I've learned so much from him. And the biggest thing I learned from him was this asymmetrical risk reward, that when he risks $1, he wants to be certain he's going to make 5 where he doesn't risk the dollar. See, most people risk $1 to make 10% or 20%. You won't do that. If you do that, you're going to go broke. Because here's what happens. You risk $1 to try to make 5 and you're wrong. Risk another $1, and if you win, you still win big. You can be wrong 4 out of 5 times and still break even. That's how the best in the world do it. They don't do it by taking these gigantic risks where everything's on the line, and if it doesn't go perfectly, you're out of business. That's why most businesses go out. You want to think of asymmetrical risk reward.
Tudor Jones, curiously, as an aside, was a classmate of mine at the University of Virginia.
Wow, that's awesome.
I met him there. He would
world.
never remember me, but a fascinating guy. Another aside, because you mentioned he's a hedge fund manager in Connecticut. You did a brilliant interview with Ray Dalio for, I believe it was Facebook, not long ago.
Yeah.
And his book is really terrific, called Principles.
I recommend you all go get it. It's
very, very good.
It's one of the greatest business books I've ever read, because if you don't know who Ray is, most of you know Warren Buffett. That's because Warren Buffett is sweet in shares and his public nature. But Ray is actually the most successful investor of his type in the history of the world. He's returned more money to investors from a hedge fund perspective than anybody in history. When I met Ray 10 years ago, you had to have a $5 billion net worth for him to talk to you. You couldn't be a billionaire, that's too weak. And you had to give him $100 million to start. Now he won't take your money no matter who you are. When I went to go interview him the first time, the Prime Minister of China was talking to him on the phone. He was coaching China on what to do with their money. That's how brilliant he is.
Yeah.
Hedge fund people, if you're familiar with rich people give their money to hedge funds, a big one might be, let's say, 20 billion. He's 160 billion. But go get his book. He flew down to Palm Beach to my home. And it's called Principles. He said, I want you to be the first person to interview me and do it on Facebook Live, so I did. But I love this man, and he will show you how he built from nothing. He literally started with nothing. He worked as a caddy. He started when he was 26 years old in a 2-bedroom apartment, and now he's got 1,800 employees and 160 billion. And he's one of the 100 richest men in the world and one of the top 10 that you'll meet. But his insights about how to run a business, how to run your life, we all need principles to guide our decision making. If you really think about it, success is the result of good judgment, right? If you make great decisions, you're going to succeed. But where does good judgment come from? You know, good judgment often comes from experience, and experience often comes from bad judgment, right? So what I found is the way to speed it up, the way to have less of that bad judgment is
I got to think about that for a minute. That's good. That's
true, though, right?
Good, yeah.
So I found the way to speed it up is not learn through my own experience, but learn by modeling others, compress decades into days. So if you can get in a Ray's head, now Ray's been a very private man for the last decade and a half, but he's 68 years old. He's a good friend, and he's entering this stage where he now wants to go public for a short time, give everybody a nose, and then disappear because he feels an obligation to give back to the society and human beings that have helped him to succeed.
Yeah,
so go pick it up. It'll be fantastic.
We had him at another event, and he talks about this idea of radical transparency and how he runs his business. It's a very different, I'm not sure it would work for every business, but it certainly worked for him. Let's go to Satori's question. With so many people wanting your help, what are the factors for you to select whom you privately train or mentor? You're a busy guy. You've got a time management thing. I'm sure a lot of people would like a piece of Tony Robbins' mind.
Yes.
How do you decide whom you're going to help?
Well, first of all, I try to do things online. There's a zillion things on YouTube, so no one has to spend any money. Anybody who wants to be inspired can do that. The only thing I don't like about that is it's random. Mm-hmm. I'm a system guy. I know how to take you from here to there, so I have products that can do that for people. And then I have events, and the events have gotten bigger and bigger. Now we do 10, 14,000 people in a weekend, and so anybody can go. Who I coach are people that I know by touching them I can touch millions more. So when I worked with Mark Benioff at Salesforce, in the early days, Mark sat in the front row, came to 3 of my same seminars in a row, and was like, are you new? Are you a little slow? I was teasing him, And Mark's as big as I am. He stands up, and I'm looking at this guy eye to eye, and he goes, my name is Mark Benioff, and because of you, you finally pushed me over the edge. I'm going to start my own business. I'm leaving Oracle. I'm going to start this company called Salesforce.com. And he said, and you mark my words, we're going to change business around the world. We're going to do $100 million in business. Well, this year he's going to do 10 billion, right? So he's grown a little bit. But when you're around people like that, you get to see what the distinctions are that separate people. You get to see what makes them stand out. And by coaching him, I'm able to affect everybody, not only all of him and his employees, because he's that kind of owner, right? He's a leader, but also he's a leader in the social community. He's very conscious about that. And everybody from Facebook to Apple to GE, their back end is Salesforce. So impacting him impacts many other people. And then I just pick people who I feel the need is. I mean, somebody stops me on the street, my wife will tell you I can't not help. I got to help someone. Now I may have limited time, so then I'll invite them to a seminar or send them a book or a package or something so I can give them a guide to go to the next level. So I don't ever say no, but I can't coach everybody one-on-one, so I try to do it in groups where
there was a wonderful anecdote I read, since you brought up Mark Benioff, that I guess he was a guest at at your home or resort in Fiji, and in the middle of the night, he and all of the other guests, this goes to the question of how do you overcome your fears? Tell that story about Benioff jumping into the river and what you didn't tell him about the river.
Okay. Well, I have a home in Fiji. I've been going there since I was 23, 24 years old. It's my favorite places in the world. And the people there are extraordinary. You're carried as a child every day for 6 months by someone 24/7. So when we talk about raising them, being raised by a village, it's true there. And they sing in 4-part harmony when they're 4 years old. So when I went there, I was touched by it. And I went and explored this island, and I was with this chief. And they have this river that goes both ways, because it's this river where the ocean comes in, and it looks like out of Africa or something you'd see down in South America, and eventually goes in this scary looking area into a giant lake. But the tide is so fast, it would just take you. And then 8 hours later, it reverses and goes back out. So I was with him this one day, and I said, are there any fish in there? And the Ratu, which is the main chief, points out, goes, what about that? And we looked back, and it's a giant manta ray going under the bridge. So I said, F it, I'm doing this. And I just jumped in. And then the thing took me. And it took me for a wild ass ride. For about 20 minutes, I ended up this lake. And then, dumbass me, I didn't think about how the hell am I gonna get back. It was so strong I couldn't swim against it. So I spent 8 hours on this little island there before I came back. So then I came back one time with a friend. It was nighttime, and I was like, they were talking about Devil Rock and Shark Alley and all this shit. And I was like, let's do it at night. But I had a boat waiting for us in the lake to bring us back. But we jumped in, and it was scary as hell, and all the phosphorescence going on looks like pixie dust. It's a wild experience. Flying fish scare the shit out of you. They come by. And so when Mark came, he flew over and come spend a week with me there. I took him and woke him up, and you have to do when the tide is. It was like 2 in the morning. I woke them all up and said, I got a surprise for you. Like, what? I said, just trust me. Dragged them all on, put wet gear on them, gave them life preservers, and then threw him off, and Mark was freaking out, and I grabbed his hand, and I go, we'll go on 3, 1, and we went on 1. Because I can feel him, and he's as big as I am. If I try to jump, he might be hanging me out there just holding on. Right? So Mark talks about that story a lot, but overcoming fear. Because whatever you're afraid of, it's never as much as you're afraid of, right? So how many things you've been afraid of that never happen? Right? And then the things you are afraid of, if they do happen, you just deal with them. It's that old phrase, coward dies 1,000 deaths, a courageous man only once. I discipline myself, not perfectly, but for the most part, I don't worry about shit till it happens. I anticipate it, but I don't worry about it.
If state is everything, I assume that means state of mind. How do you stay in a great state of mind 24/7? Should that even be your goal?
I think it's worthwhile to have as a goal. I don't think it's realistic 24/7 whenever having any blurbs, because we all have a 2-million-year-old brain. Everybody in this room has that. I do too. And it's not designed to make you happy. It's designed to make you survive. So if I said to all of you right now, what does that brain look for? It looks for what can hurt you, and it exaggerates it. And since there's no saber-toothed tiger now, it says, what are people thinking of me? Will my business make it? Do I have enough money? And these are all easy things to solve, but our reactions in our gut, when we let the fear part of our mind take over, that basically the survival software, if it runs you, you're in trouble. So a few years ago, I actually lecture on this now. I say, you need 2 skills to have the quality of life you want. If you want an extraordinary life on your terms, whatever your terms are, you need to master the skill of the science of achievement. You got to figure out, how do I take what I dream about and make it real? And it's a science. And you can model other people, and you can learn, you can speed up. I've spent my lifetime doing that. But the second skill, and the one that most people don't give enough value to culturally, is more important. And that is, you need to alter, if you want an extraordinary life, how many people do you know that have achieved it? How many have done this? Who's achieved a goal that was a big goal? You worked your ass off and you achieved it, and then your brain went, is this all there is? Who's had one of these moments? Yeah, almost everybody. And that's worse than failing, because we're all achievers in this room, right? So if you fail, what are you gonna do? You get back up, you try another approach, you're gonna eventually succeed. You know it in your gut if you're really driven. But if you succeed and you're miserable, now you're what I call technically screwed, right? I mean, because if you're not happy with what you got, I mean, failing, you get up and do something new, but succeeding, where do you go? So I really believe, you look at somebody like say, Robin Williams. I think the loss of him is one of the greatest losses we had. He's loved worldwide. I asked people all over the world last year in China, I asked them in Japan and Sydney, Australia, throughout the US, how many of you loved, don't raise your hand if you liked him, how many of you loved Robin Williams? I'm curious. Keep your hands up, look around the room. Like 98%, only 2% assholes that didn't like Robin Williams in this room. But when I say this, I didn't say like, I said loved. And so here's a guy, was he an overachiever? He came to Hollywood, everybody comes to Hollywood. He said, I'm on my own show. Yeah, sure you are, buddy. Who's old enough to remember the show? What was it called?
Mork and Mindy.
Mork and Mindy. It's old people in this room, clearly, right? He does Mork and Mindy, but he also makes it the #1 show. Then he says, I'm gonna have a beautiful family, he does that. Then he says, I wanna make more money than I could spend, he does that. Then he says, I wanna make movies, he does that. Then he says, I wanna win an Academy Award for not being funny, his #1 skill. And he did it. And then he hung himself in his own home, leaving his wife and children to find his lifeless body. How do you explain that? I'll tell you the answer. He made everybody happy but whom? And his wife said he had Lewy bodies and upsets in his brain. That's all true, but he used drugs and alcohol his entire life. He suffered his entire life, made everybody happy but himself. And so I love the guy. One of my birthdays, I was at TED and I did this talk, which was very popular, and he came to my birthday party. A bunch of guys took me out to dinner that night and jumped on top of the table and sang happy birthday as a Russian woman and then as a Chinese man. And you know, I've never lost a suicide, knock on wood, out of thousands. We've made films and follow-up, but I had no idea that's where he was. But I look at a man like that and I say, he's a warning as much as we all loved him, even more so because we loved him. I know none of you are going to kill yourself. I'm not worried about that. But a lot of people live a long time, but they don't really live, you know, because they let their stress and their frustration, you know, I always say achievers don't get fearful. We're all achievers, right? We don't get fearful, we just get stressed, right? Stress is the achiever word for fear. Because when I say to you, what are you stressed about? Well, I got to do this, I got to make this thing happen. What if you don't? Well, I got to. Well, what if it'll fall apart? What if it falls apart? Then it'll fail. What if it fails? Then I'm a failure. What if you're a failure? And now if I follow the trail of your stress, it'll take me to your deepest fear. And the only way to have your life work is to face that fear and push through it. What is courage? Courage does not mean you're not afraid. It means you're afraid and you do it anyway. You're scared shitless, but you do it anyway. And I think if you're going to succeed at the highest level, you've got to face those fears.
Leads right to the next question. Based on your experience, what are the top 3 characteristics to have in order to be successful? For these type of people, what does success look like? What does it feel like? What are the characteristics that can get you there?
What success looks like and feels like is different for everyone because we all define success in a different way. So I leave that to them. But what does it take to succeed? That I can tell you because I could be an idiot at this point. But when you've been with 50 million people, 4 million in live seminars for days and nights and days and nights, I know that whatever we do, it's the result of our patterns. It's not us. There are certain patterns that'll make you angry, they'll make you frustrated, they'll make you pissed off. And there's certain patterns of thinking and feeling and using your body that'll make you playful and fun and grateful and excited and passionate. And if you think it's you, because you've done a pattern so long, it's hard to change yourself, but it's easy to change a pattern.
Where do the patterns come from?
We learn them through our conditioning. When you first are born, you can do anything and you're loved. You can, scream, yell, go to the bathroom in your pants. Try that when you're 30, see if it works, right? But you learn very quickly as time goes by, your love for nothing as a baby, right? Your love no matter what you do, because your mother's, got oxytocin. She's drugged, natural drug in her body. Men get it too, but women get 10 times as much. That's why a healthy woman cannot leave her child. A healthy man can, but a woman can't. She's biochemically healthy. And so you look at this and you say, what are the 3 things needed? I can tell you what they are. The #1, I love intelligence. I love wickedly intelligent people. I try to hire as many of them as possible, learn from them. But what's more valuable than intelligence is hunger. You find, if you looked at what's the common denominator between Richard Branson, Mark Benioff, you give me your list of whoever it is, I guarantee if you dig underneath, their hunger has never gone away. Some people get hungry because they got a goal to, achieve something or get in a swimsuit by a certain date or some stuff, but that's not an identity change, right? These are people that are like myself. I'm hungry today at 57 more than I was at 26. I'm feeling me. And when I say hungry, I'm hungry to contribute, to learn, to grow, to make a difference. I'll never settle less than I can be or do or share or give or create. And everyone I know that's successful, that's the driving force. Because with that hunger, you can get the skill. With that hunger, you can figure it out. There are a lot of very smart people who can't fight their way out of a paper bag in a pragmatic way. And they got, great transcripts and shit like that. I went to Harvard one time and I spoke, and right before I spoke, they had voted at Harvard Business School to not release anyone's transcripts to the recruiters of the businesses coming in, to block it. And the argument was, your education is more than just your grades. And I went berserk. I got up there, first of all, they said, Tony, I expect to be, 1,000 people there, a couple thousand people there. And they said, no, Bill Gates was here, we have 300 people, it's gonna be much smaller. But we ended up with about 1,200 people, standing room only. And they gave me 30 minutes, and of course I went 3 hours. I did, no one left. But one of the first things I did, I said, what is this bullshit I'm reading? This was in the paper that day. I said, listen, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you've been disrespectful to each other. I said, if you're not willing to show your transcripts, I agree with you. Your career, who you are, is more than just your degree here. But you chose Harvard for a reason. And there are people here that have worked around the clock and gotten, 4.0, and you got yourself a 2.6, and you're going to block them because there's more of you than the 4.0. It's not going to work that way when you get in business. When you get in business, you guys who are doing this right now, you're going to be judged on one thing, results. And your grades are the results in this context. And if you think your grades are not it, then convince me as the interviewer that the grades are a part of it, but there's so much more you've done. If you can't do that, you're never going to make it. I said, you guys, anybody voted for that? Just count on a future that is full with pain. And the room was like, it was pretty intense, I guess. I thought it was pretty soft, personally. And then all of a sudden people stood up and they did a standing ovation, and people said, this is bullshit, because this is what happens sometimes in a democracy. Sometimes in a democracy, the lowest level standard is what becomes natural. We're seeing it right now on the political side. We're seeing people that are, in Berkeley, the home of free speech, people throwing things, burning things, destroying things, who are supposed to be liberals who should be open for open speech. And then you see conservatives that are just as dumb, saying things that are inflaming people. It's not one side or the other, it's us as a society. We gotta shift it. We gotta go from demonization to saying, let's say it's a fight over guns. Very emotional fight. What's the problem? We demonize each side. Nobody in this room, whether you're pro-gun or against gun, whether you want gun regulation or not, there's nobody in this room that doesn't want their children or their friends or their family safe and protected. We just disagree. People disagree on how. And if we can start with what we agree on, we can actually make progress. But today, there's no progress because we now also augment this with social media, and we augment it with the regular media. And think about it. The media is not here to inform you. They're here to startle you. We all know if we say something inflaming, you're going to talk about it, share it on social media, and they got a multiplied effect. It's all about advertising. So you have to really discern yourself today. You have to understand it's the Wild West, not only on the internet, but on television as well. And you have to decide, if you're an independent thinker, what is really right, and maybe be part of the solution instead of another person that attacks the right or the left, Donald Trump or whoever it is that you'd be attacking. There's lots of people that are easy to attack, but attacking doesn't change or improve anything, in my opinion.
We gave you 45 minutes. Would anybody here mind if we went a little longer? Would you mind if we went a little longer?
Sure.
So let me...
5 or 6 more hours?
Yeah, 5 or 6 more hours. We'll bring the bar inside is what we'll do.
But I want to finish what I said just for 1 second.
Yeah, please do.
I want to answer this person's question, which was 3 things.
Oh, 3. We got through 1, hunger.
Yeah,
okay, let's get
fast.
to 2 and 3.
Hunger is the number 1. I think the number 2 is having a mission larger than yourself. Because it's kind of like having a child, right? Having a child is a very exciting thing, and then you have a child and you go, what did I do? Sometimes, right? Same thing with a business, right? You've got to really be able to have something you're doing it for that's more than you, because in the early days of the business, it doesn't really make you any money, and you work your tail off. So you need pride of ownership, you need joy, you need a mission. And I really believe until you find something that you care about more than yourself, you'll never discover what you're capable of. Because we'll all do more for others that we love or respect than we'll ever do for ourselves. That's part of the beauty of being a human. Most of us do more for our kids, for example, than other people. And then I think the third thing is, you got mission and hunger, is you really have to become obsessed with strategies, because strategies can save you so much time. The wrong strategy, I'll give you a stupid metaphor. If you said your number 1 goal is to see a sunset, and then you start running east as fast as you can, I don't give a shit how positive you are. I don't care how hard you work. I don't care how long you've been putting into it. You got the wrong strategy. But the right strategy in business and in life can save you a decade. And someone else may have spent, again, a decade figuring it out through trial and error, and then they figured it out. You might be able to learn it in 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 days or 6 hours. So I think that would be my third element.
So let me ask you a question that may be a little off point, but I hope helpful. A lot of people in this room and a lot of people in the world want to follow their passion, okay? But they've also got to put food on the table and pay the rent and pay the bills. How do you do both at the same time? How do you build, have your mission, have your passion, and do that when you know the world is a tough place, hard to make a living, hard to pay the bills, places expensive? How do you do that? How do you thread that needle?
Well, it depends on who you're dealing with, right? If the person is entrepreneurial and they ask me this question, I always tell them, you've got to take care of your kids, you've got to pay the bills. And I said, but, tell me when you work. And they tell me, well, I work, 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 and I'm exhausted and everything else. I said, well, what are you doing with the other 8 hours? Because that's what I did. I worked as a janitor all night long, middle of the night, everything else. I could compress time there because it was based on results, not time. So if I could do a great job in shorter time, I had that time. But then, what I start doing between, 7 o'clock at night and 2 in the morning, which is pretty much the time I worked, that's when I was developing myself, getting the skills, learning, educating, starting the business. So I think people just have to realize it's a gut-wrenching process. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Most people fail in entrepreneurship. The vast majority fail. 96% at 10 years, but what happens after 10 years? All clear sailing after that? Anybody remember Lehman Brothers? They're around a century. They had gross revenues over a century of more than $1 trillion with a T dollars. That's what went through their bank accounts over that century, and they're gone. So I don't think it's right for everybody. I think you have to really be clear, is your personality the right personality if you're going to begin in this area? And then if you're going to work for somebody else, you can still become financially free, but that means you got to stop being a consumer and become an owner under entrepreneurs. You want to own businesses, right? Get out of just being, don't just own an iPhone, own the company, but not just Apple, obviously. But
how do you keep your energy up and your enthusiasm up? How do you do it?
I'm wired for it. It's my nature to some extent, but also the other part is I get to see results. I mean, who here has been touched by my work before? I'm curious. Anybody in this room? So look around the room, and how's it hard to be inspired when I'm in a room and a third or 40% or 50% have used my work? And so people come up to me every day, dozens of people a day if I'm traveling, and they tell me the most amazing stories. Outside my children and my wife, that's probably the greatest gift of my life. I never get tired of hearing it, and it just makes me want to deliver more, give more, have more impact.
Yeah. You get the last word. Tell them what you want them to know.
Well, if you're entrepreneurs out there, here's what I'd say to you. I'd say, don't be so damn hard on yourself. I know that sounds counter to being an achiever, but when you're beating yourself up, you're sucking out the energy you need to move forward. It's kind of like, I always tell people there's so much energy, and I've built mine. I do a lot of things to build my energy to be incredibly strong and have really strong endurance, because to me, energy is life. If you don't have strong energy, you're not going to do anything. But even after we look at that energy, it only goes so many places. So if your energy is being caught up, if you take energy in a business and you pour it into external marketing, going out and reaching people and adding value, that business is going to grow. But if there are inner conflicts in that business between people, then the energy is being sucked in here and less energy is going out there. The business is going to have problems. That's also true of you. If you allow your disappointments to create these inner conflicts and fears and you let them run wild within you, they're going to suck the energy out you need to go to the next level in your business. You have to discipline your disappointment now. Mine is the 90-second rule. So watch this. Try something real fast. Look around this room. I'm going to give you a test. Look around this room and see everything that's brown. I'm going to test you in a moment. Look behind you, look around you, look at clothing, look at people, look anything that's brown. Brown, 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 brown. Record it in your mind. Close your eyes. Now, with your eyes closed, tell me everything you saw just now that was red. If you see more brown than red, say aye. Open your eyes, look for red now. Really look for red. Look for it anywhere you can find it. Look around you, look beside you, look at the front, the back. How many found more red this time? Raise your hand if you did. Say aye. Why'd you find more red this time?
Because you told me to.
Seek and ye shall find. But here's what's amazing. Seek and you shall find even if it's not there. I'll prove it to you. How many saw beige shit, called it brown just to feel successful? How many saw burgundy, called it red just to count more pieces? So if you think you're a jerk or someone else is a jerk, you're going to color it. You're going to change it. You're going to find the jerkiness in them. You're going to find the jerk in you. It's really important that you manage your mental and emotional state because you are the business. If you are the leader, your responsibility, your job, your opportunity, your privilege is to be able to truly lead. And you cannot lead if you're living in fear. You cannot lead in a place of constant uncertainty. We all have uncertainty at times. But if you watch an athlete go out to shoot a free throw or a kicker in the NFL to go kick the ball, how many of you have seen that person? They're about to kick it, they're about to shoot it, and you go, they're going to miss it, and you know they're going to miss it. Who's experienced this before? How did you know? You could see in their body that they're missing the core ingredient, absolute certainty. You can have the great skills in the world, but when you lose that certainty, the athlete goes down. That's usually when I get the call. I got to rewire them and get them back where they can execute at that level. So be kind to yourself, as corny as that sounds. Not to be kind to yourself, but so there's more energy available to solve the problems and to build the business and to meet your mission. Because the time you're beating yourself up, you're trying to prove to yourself you really care, but meanwhile what you're doing is sucking the energy out of your growth. I had somebody who embezzled some money when I was a tiny company. Like when the company was $3 million. And the guy embezzled $250,000, and I was $758,000 in debt and thought I was in profit. And in those days, everybody told me I had to go bankrupt. And I remember I was just like so angry. There's so much anger because my business was like my child. And this guy tried to kill my child, you know? So I was chasing him into Mexico so I could beat the hell out of him and put him in prison. And then I realized in the middle of this stuff, I got to let go of this because while I'm busy being angry and pissed off, the business is going to go under. I'm chasing birds. What am I do when I catch the bird? I got to focus on how to add the value. And so take your energy. That's all you have in this life. And invest it in the things you love. In those you love, in the mission of your business, and in your clients. If you fall in love with what you do, who you do it with, and who you do it for, there'll be no limit to your impact. But you got to be willing to do it for decades because it's all bullshit. Maybe you'll hit the lucky thing and it'll happen in 12 months. But even if you don't, even if you did, you know, I got a friend who's one of my partners in the LAFC and so forth, you know, Chad, who started YouTube, for example, and $1.6 billion in what, 18 months, 24 months, that type of thing. It's not always the best thing because ultimately in life, whenever you meet people who have succeeded, almost always we talk about the toughest times and laugh and remember because in order to have a foreground, you need a background. And to appreciate the foreground, you need a background. So I found that the most difficult times have been the best times because they've made me appreciate what my life is like today. And I hope you'll just take care of yourselves. And I hope today, this whole day, all the speakers, and hopefully a little of our conversation has been helpful too. And I thank you for letting me address you.
Thank you so much. Loved it.